Hello and welcome to the news update from the Faroe Islands in English. Here are the top stories from the past week. An EU proposal could have consequences for the traditional Faroese pilot whale hunt. Denmark says its fisheries agreement with Russia, the Faroe Islands' neighbour, remains a matter for the Faroese authorities, despite growing security concerns. A major shake-up of the Public Works Authority, Landsverk, is facing political scrutiny, and Føroya Banki reports a strong first half of the year. First, the European Commission has proposed a common EU position for the next 3 meetings of the International Whaling Commission. The proposal seeks, among other things, to preserve the ban on commercial whaling and bring whaling by all member countries under IWC oversight. According to the Danish Foreign Ministry, that could have consequences for small whale hunting in both the Faroe Islands and Greenland, including the Faroese pilot whale hunt. The Danish government supports protection against hunting that is not conducted responsibly. But it also maintains that marine resources should be available for sustainable use based on scientific evidence. Denmark says the EU proposal could therefore conflict with the combined interests of the Danish realm. Faroese and Greenlandic authorities have been asked for their views. Security and relations with Russia were also back in focus this week. The Faroe Islands have had a bilateral fisheries agreement with Russia since 1977. It was renewed last year despite controversy following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 2 Russian shipping companies suspected of espionage have, however, been barred from Faroese waters and ports. Danish Defence Minister Jeppe Bruus says the fisheries agreement is for the Faroese to handle, and he does not expect it to be expanded. At the same time, he describes the Russian threat as real and says Russia is already conducting hybrid warfare against the West. His talks with Faroese counterpart focused mainly on increased military cooperation, including more frequent visits by frigates and transport aircraft, and greater activity involving F-35 fighter jets. At home, opposition politician Sigrid Stenberg is demanding detailed figures on public construction projects as the government prepares to dismantle the construction administration within Landsverk. She wants information on every project worth more than 5 million kroner, for which Landsverk has been the client since January 2015, including budgets, final costs, planned and actual construction times, and the price per square metre. Under the proposed reorganisation, individual government ministries would take responsibility for their own construction projects. Stenberg is questioning whether dispersing specialist expertise across 7 ministries will be cheaper or better. There was better news from the banking sector. Føroya Banki made a profit after tax of 125 million kroner in the first 6 months of the year. Chief Executive Turid Arg says activity was 4% higher than a year earlier, while the financial position of both households and businesses remains strong. The bank now expects a full-year profit of between 195 and 235 million kroner. Lending stood at 9.8 billion kroner, deposits at 11.4 billion, and mortgage lending at 3 billion. And Faroese exporters have gained a new direct link to continental Europe. The cargo vessel Skogafoss has made its first sailing on Faroe Ship's new weekly route between Tórshavn and Rotterdam, carrying fresh and frozen fish. It leaves Tórshavn every Tuesday and returns on Monday. Meanwhile, teachers are raising concerns about language skills among Faroese children and teenagers. Birger Samuelson of the Faroese Teachers Association says Danish has become increasingly distant from young Faroese people as English occupies more of their everyday lives. He argues that Danish teaching should not be reduced and wants pupils to read more Danish books and watch more Danish and Nordic films. Finally, the Faroe Islands marked 30 years this week since one of the most traumatic air accidents in the island's recent history. On the 3rd of August 1996, a Danish Air Force Gulfstream 3 crashed into the mountain near Selvik while approaching Vágar airport. All 9 people on board were killed, including Denmark's newly appointed Chief of Defence, Admiral Hans Jørgen Garde. At the anniversary commemoration, Faroese and Danish rescue workers involved in the aftermath were honoured with special medals in recognition of their work. And that is all we have for you this week. Be sure to tune in for more news from the Faroe Islands next Sunday. Bye-bye.